Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever caught yourself wondering why your workplace is structured the exact way it is? Or maybe why certain rewards totally motivate you while others just feel, a little bit manipulative? Well, whether you realize it or not, almost every memo you read, every bonus structure you're offered, and every single performance review you sit through is deeply rooted in behavioral science. Today, we're going to unpack the completely fascinating evolution of how organizations attempt to manage, control, and ultimately empower human behavior. We'll be looking at the contrasting theories of treating humans like programmable machines versus embracing the invisible, organic web of our natural connections.
We've got an exciting journey ahead of us. We'll be covering shaping workplace behavior, the meaning of work, Rousseau's workplace revolution, people over production, and finally, the power of networking. We're starting with standard management tactics, shifting over to a wild 18th century philosophical counter-perspective, and then wrapping up with the invisible web of modern networking. Let's just dive right in.
Section 1. Shaping Workplace Behavior. Let's start by looking at exactly how traditional managers act as the literal architects of our daily routines.
To really make sense of the modern workplace, we have to understand organizational behavior science, or OBS for short. At its core, this is a field that looks at how individuals, roles, and structures impact behavior within an organization. It focuses heavily on three subsystems: the individual, the social, and the formal. Imagine it like a giant puzzle. You might have a brilliant but introverted employee, that's your individual piece, clashing with a super extroverted team culture, the social side, all while being boxed in by strict corporate reporting rules, the formal system. OBS looks at how these puzzle pieces fit together. But traditionally, the big focus here is on behavior modification. It's all about the processes managers use to spark, reinforce, and make sure the right behaviors keep happening. It leans heavy on a stimulus-response model. Basically, the idea is that an individual's response leads to consequences, either positive reinforcements to encourage that behavior or negative reinforcements to stamp out something unpleasant. So, managers traditionally shape this behavior down two completely distinct paths. First up, we have direct behavior modification actions. These are your one-on-one, face-to-face strategies. Think about a direct mentorship session or a quick pay bump, even direct praise meant to boost a worker's self-efficacy, basically making them really believe in their own internal strengths. Then, on the flip side, we have indirect behavior modification actions. These are totally impersonal. This is a manager shaping behavior without a direct conversation. They do this by enacting workplace policies, using motivational language in team meetings, or setting up workplace rituals. If you've ever endured the slightly awkward mandatory fun of a Friday office pizza party, or just stared at a generic motivational poster in the break room, yep, you've experienced indirect behavior modification. And both of these paths are deliberately designed to mold you into the ideal organizational citizen.
Section 2. The meaning of work. Because before we can look at what managers actually want, we have to deeply contextualize what human beings truly need. Work is far, far more than just an economic transaction for goods and services. I mean, yes, from an economic standpoint, it brings an income and drives productivity, but think about it for a second. If you hit the jackpot tomorrow and literally never had to worry about money again, wouldn't you still want to do something productive with your time? Psychologically, work fulfills our deep need for structure. It offers a sense of accomplishment, and it provides vital social interactions that are absolutely crucial for our mental health. And philosophically, work gives us identity and purpose. It's often where we find personal fulfillment and how we feel we're contributing to society. So it's not just a paycheck. Work is quite literally how we define a huge part of our very existence.
Because work is so central to who we are, our commitment to it isn't just random. In fact, research points to 4 specific factors that shape how attached and committed we are to our jobs. Number 1 is the position we occupy in the organizational hierarchy. Number 2 is professionalism, meaning we're way more psychologically committed when we see our work as a true, specialized profession, not just some structured organizational gig. Third is the closeness of work and leisure. And no, that doesn't just mean throwing a ping pong table in the break room. It actually means finding genuine play, creativity, and flow in the work itself. And finally, the 4th factor is the value of the return, or what can ultimately be achieved. Getting a handle on these factors brings some much-needed human nuance into those rigid organizational structures we were just talking about.
Section 3. Rousseau's Workplace Revolution. Prepare yourself for a philosophical curveball that completely shatters the mechanical view of behavior we've covered so far.
Let's travel all the way back to 1762. The philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued that humans are essentially a noble savage, meaning we are naturally peaceful, free, and compassionate. According to Rousseau, we inherently possess an innate compassion for the suffering of others. But here's the kicker. He noted that social institutions, like formal organizations, actually corrupt this natural goodness. How? By constantly promoting competitiveness and comparative self-love. Fast forward to today, and you can totally see this theory in action. We might walk into a new job just wanting to do good, collaborative work, but then forced rankings and comparative performance metrics come along, and suddenly they turn supportive peers into competitive rivals.
This creates an unbelievable amount of tension, right? And it forces us to ask a pretty difficult question based on Rousseau's theories. Are standard managerial actions, like rewards, reinforcements, and behavioral shaping, actually destroying our authentic pride? Well, Rousseau would argue a resounding yes. He posited that performance appraisal ratings basically teach employees that their value is strictly comparative. It effectively treats human beings as standardized products. If you look at it through this lens, a standard annual performance review isn't a tool for growth at all. It's a mechanism that erodes intrinsic motivation, manipulates workers without their explicit consent, and monitors the violation of our natural liberty. So, how do we fix it? Well, this framework illustrates exactly how Rousseau's theories might be applied to rethink management entirely. Instead of treating humans like mechanisms that need programming, Rousseau believed true freedom is obedience to a self-given law. He championed self-management and autonomy over arbitrary authority. To actually apply this in a 21st century boardroom, managers would take 4 steps. First, encourage employees to engage in diagnosing problems themselves, instead of a manager just unilaterally pointing out flaws. Second, collaboratively set behavior goals together during one-on-ones rather than just handing down a quota. Third, empower employees to propose their very own reinforcements. And fourth, encourage self-monitoring. Here, managers act as coaches and mentors, not just enforcers dishing out corporate sanctions.
Section 4. People over production. This philosophical clash between control and autonomy perfectly sets up the 2 main, contrasting paths of modern management.
When we place these 2 philosophies side by side, a really stark divide emerges. In a production-centered model, completing the task takes priority over people's satisfaction. People are essentially viewed as machines, just replaceable inputs to be directed and optimized for maximum throughput. It relies heavily on hard, teachable technical skills. Conversely, a people-centered management philosophy sees human dignity, growth, and well-being as the absolute primary drivers of sustainable operational efficiency. This approach assumes that long-term reliability requires deep process knowledge that actually lives inside the minds of the team, not just codified in some dusty manual. It thrives on soft skills like active empathetic listening, where a manager truly hears the nuance behind an employee's concern, and psychological safety, making sure team members feel totally secure taking risks and speaking up. The crucial takeaway here is that you simply cannot achieve sustainable greatness just by threatening people with consequences if their output drops. George Bernard Shaw brilliantly hits the nail on the head with this quote: "True greatness requires responsibility, and success consists of learning from mistakes rather than never making them." Punishing mistakes, which happens all the time in a strict production-centered model, often just leads to employees sweeping their errors under the rug. But openly learning from those mistakes, which happens in a people-centered workplace, actually builds incredibly valuable institutional knowledge and fosters real psychological safety.
Section 5. The power of networking. So, if real work doesn't just happen through top-down mandates, and we really want to embrace this people-centered approach, how does anything actually get done? Let's check out our final topic.
The answer lies in the invisible web of informal networking. In organizational behavior science, networking is the study of how relationships and informal connections shape how work actually gets done. It acts as a web of exchange processes, behavioral influence, and resource sharing. I mean, think about the last time you needed to fast-track an urgent approval. Did you submit a ticket to the formal corporate portal and wait 3 business days? Or did you just ping a colleague you have a great relationship with on Slack? That is the invisible web in action. It's all about proactively building relationships to get information way faster than formal channels ever could. Essentially, these informal networks bridge the massive gap between abstract corporate theory and the actual messy reality of the workplace. And right at the very heart of this invisible web is human personality. As Ben Stein perfectly noted, personality is the fertile soil from which all advancements and achievements in real life begin and end. These informal, dynamic relationships take root directly in our social personality. In a corporate ecosystem, your ability to tune into different frequencies, share processed facts with a little bit of nuance, and align your goals with others, that's not just nice to have, it's a high-level survival skill. It's this social personality that allows real organizational advancement to flourish.
Now, recognizing the power of these informal networks isn't just some modern, trendy concept. This understanding of the workplace as an organic network was built over time by some incredible foundational thinkers. Between 1858 and 1918, you had George Simmel, who is basically the intellectual forebearer of social network analysis. Then, jump to the 1930s, and psychiatrist Jacob Moreno was creating sociograms to visually map out interpersonal relationships. You can basically think of these as the great-grandfather of your modern LinkedIn network map. By the 1950s, researchers like Levitt and Bailevis were conducting systematic research on exactly how communication structures influence group behavior. Bringing these historical figures into context anchors this whole abstract concept of networks into a proven historical progression. We have known for a century that human connection is the real engine of an organization.
Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought to take away from this explainer. We've seen how standard behavior modification tries to strictly architect our actions. We've explored Rousseau's radical warning that comparative institutions can actually corrupt our natural compassion. And we've seen that informal networks and human relationships are the absolute true drivers of workplace reality. So ask yourself, if informal networks and human connections drive true operational efficiency, are your organization's formal rules empowering that web or destroying it? Is your workplace treating you as a standardized product on an assembly line, or is it actively empowering your natural human connections to thrive? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it changes the way you look at the invisible web of your own workplace.